What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the Season 2 update for Modern Warfare 3 is here, and today we're going to be going over all of the miscellaneous gameplay affecting changes. And with this update, there were actually a few really key changes that are going to have a fairly significant impact on the overall gameplay experience, especially for mouse and keyboard players, but this will also be great for controller players. Now, just a heads up, I'm not covering any of the weapon balancing adjustments in today's video. I will get to that for tomorrow's video, and that's just because it takes me a long time to get those together because I like actually showing exact before and after comparisons whenever possible, and I'm not just reading out the patch notes like most other content creators will, and therefore it always takes me a little extra time because I aim to be the best at these patch note videos, not the fastest. So without further ado, let's dive right into the changes, and the first big change that came with the Season 2 update is a complete overhaul to how they're handling idle sway. And this is the change that's going to have the biggest impact for mouse and keyboard players, but like I said, this is also going to be good for controller players, and I'm happy to see this as a controller player as well. But diving right in, the first thing they did here is when you initially aim down sight, pre-patch, your reticle wouldn't necessarily be perfectly centered, and that meant even if you were really precise with your centering and your aim, it didn't really matter because there's some randomness programmed in there, and you can see that taking place right here, especially when I add the crosshairs to the screen. When I first aim down sight, that dot is not perfectly centered on my screen. Whereas post-patch, now it is perfectly centered on the screen every single time I aim down sight. It goes right to the center of the screen perfectly, and that's excellent to see, but that's just the first part of it. The second part is your idle sway has a slight delay before it kicks in now. Previously, that idle sway was happening while you were in the process of aiming down sight. It was already happening. Now, there's a slight delay after you get fully aimed down sight before the idle sway kicks in. And again, this is really going to reward precision for snapping onto target quickly. And this is excellent news. This is actually how idle sway used to work in the older Call of Duty games. I'm not too sure why they ended up changing this. I'm pretty sure it was Infinity Ward that changed this back in the day, and Sledgehammer just sort of inherited that code, and now they're fixing those issues. But in either case, that's great, especially for those mouse and keyboard players out there. Now, one big note here with this is this will not apply to sniper rifles. Sniper rifles, when you first aim down sight, they're not necessarily going to be perfectly centered. And in my opinion, this is a good thing. It helps keep quickscoping in check, at least to a degree. This is something I've actually been doing for a long time in Call of Duty as well. I believe it was like Black Ops 1 where they first introduced this mechanic where sniper rifles specifically would have a little bit of random off-center aim when you first aim down sight. And again, I think that's perfectly fine for this game. Quickscoping is powerful enough as is. Next, something that's kind of related to this is your hipfire. Previously, as you were swaying your aim around, your point of aim with hipfire wouldn't be perfectly centered, and it would either lead or follow wherever your aim was moving. You can see here, compared to those center lines, it's all over the place pre-patch, whereas post-patch, it now remains perfectly static on that. And keep in mind, I didn't just change my in-game settings so it has the static crosshairs. The crosshairs and the point of aim are actually static by default, and this is going to make your hipfire a lot more accurate as well. So there we go, those are the first couple changes, and these are honestly a very big deal with the game. I think aiming and shooting is going to feel a whole lot better after this update, especially on mouse and keyboard, but also with controller. Next, let's get into another really big change that came with this update that I was very surprised to see. This is a faster health regeneration across the board by default. I know many of us have been asking for like a quick fix style perk or vest in the game, and I don't think we're going to need that anymore because they very noticeably sped up our health regeneration rates. And it was nice of them in the patch notes, they provided exact values here, so I didn't have to calculate this for myself, but I did test and confirm in game. Pre-patch, when it came to the healing delay, so how long it takes from the last time that you've taken damage before you start your health regeneration, previously this was 4 seconds. Now it's cut down to 3 seconds, and that 1 second difference is actually a pretty big deal. 1 second in Call of Duty terms, when we're talking about being in the action and in gunfights, that's a very long time. On top of that though, they also significantly improved our healing rate from 40 HP per second up to 75 HP per second. And what this means is if you take in 50% damage or 75 damage in the game, previously it would take you a total of 5.9 seconds from the moment you took that damage to the moment you were back to full health, whereas post-patch, it's now just 4 seconds. That's the amount of time it used to take just to start your healing in the past, but now you're going to be at full health by the time 4 seconds has elapsed. Then taking a look at a more extreme example, if you've taken 140 damage, so you're super low health, pre-patch, the total healing time would be 7.5 seconds. Now it's just 4.9 seconds, which is an insane difference. You're going to be able to get back in the fight way faster now after this update. And I think this is going to play out great. Now, of course, we have to get some playtime with it to really see how we feel. Honestly, I think on the bigger maps, health regeneration wasn't a really big issue, but on the smaller maps especially, that health regeneration definitely felt super slow, especially if you were used to using Quick Fix in Modern Warfare 2, for instance. And this is just going to allow you to get back in the fight after taking damage significantly faster than pre-patch. And there we go. That's two major changes to how the game is going to be playing out on a game-to-game basis and on a gunfight-to-gunfight basis. And I'm very excited to get some playtime with this update to try this out and see how the game feels now, because I think both of these combined are going to have a pretty big impact. Next up, one of the biggest issues I've had with the game recently has been the spawn design. The spawns have been in a horrible state, at least for Domination, which is my preferred game mode. I'm sure other modes are struggling with spawns as well. And in the patch notes, they mentioned just a couple spawn adjustments they made. So with High Rise, there were a couple adjustments, as well as Terminal in the security area. This is something I also asked about in a creator call that we had with the developers a couple days ago on Monday, where they went over a lot of these details, and we had a little Q&A session after. My big question was, are you going to work on spawns? And their response to this was, there will be some spawn adjustments with this, and they are constantly working on spawns and will continue to be working on spawns as time goes on. So I'm hoping there's more than just these couple specific adjustments that they've made here, and they've actually made some general logic adjustments. But this is the type of thing that takes some time to really get a feel for, so we're definitely going to need at least like a few days to get a good feel for whether or not the spawns have changed in general. After that, in the patch notes, they mentioned a few changes to the kill feed. The line duration went from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds, and the line fade duration went from 1 second to 0.5 seconds. This is primarily going to be a change that affects like the snipers out there that are trying to get the biggest feeds possible. I think for the average player out there, this probably won't make too much of a difference. It appears they've also finally fixed the bug where your field of view can be set way higher than intended after you infill into a match. And another key bug they apparently fixed here is players that have the slide only option set with their controller settings should no longer be diving unintentionally when they meant to slide. Now, for both of these issues, I haven't experienced either of them myself, so I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys have been experiencing these issues since the game launched, please let me know if you're still experiencing them or if it is fixed for you. Next, let's get into a new feature they added. This is with the advanced stats. You can now look at the advanced stats of the gun while you're in the weapon selection menu rather than the gunsmith section. And what this allows you to do is compare guns to each other. So you can look at the current gun you have activated, and you can just scroll through and hover on top of all the other guns, and you'll see the exact differences between your current gun that you have selected and the gun that you're hovering over. After that, there were several attachments pre-patched that just couldn't be unlocked. You could see them in the menus, but there was no apparent method of unlocking them. And some of the examples here are a couple of the barrels on the Ram 7. With the longbow sniper rifle, we had the iron sight optic. With the XRK stalker, this is the no stock attachment. And for some people, the Jack BFB muzzle, this was also locked. Now, it appears for all of these, they've added a path to unlock these by just making them an armory credit unlock. So check those out. If there's an attachment that you previously were unable to unlock, have a look at it now. You may be able to activate an armory unlock for those and get them unlocked finally. As for the next bug fix that came through with this, the Stormender launcher is now working properly against all of the streaks. You guys might remember initially it was working for some streaks, but not others. And then with the Season 1 Reloaded update, they fixed a lot of the streaks that it wasn't working against, but in doing so, they broke many of the streaks that it was previously working fine with. Now it should be working fine with all of them. So that's good news. You can once again pick off those cruise missiles, as well as helicopters and VTOLs. After that, for both the medbox and munitions box field upgrade, they decreased the time to deploy from 1.9 seconds down to 1.3 seconds. Now, looking at it side by side, this definitely doesn't appear to be that much of an improvement. If anything, it looks like it's maybe just a few frames faster now post-patch compared to pre-patch. But even then, I would say this is just not a noticeable change at all based on my testing. On top of that, for field upgrades, it does look like they fixed the ACS. I made a video talking about this a little while ago, but essentially with the ACS, it had an infinite vertical capture area. So if you put the ACS underneath or on top of a domination flag, even if it was a level above or below that flag, it didn't matter. You could still cap the objective with the ACS. With the Season 2 update, they have fixed that, so the ACS actually has to be on the objective now. Additionally, they resolved an exploit with the tactical camera that allowed players to see through certain areas of the environment. With the deployable cover, apparently there was an exploit that allowed players to become invisible. This is the first I've heard of it, but I'm glad to hear that that has been taken care of as well before it became really widespread. And then finally for field upgrades, with the Dead Silence field upgrade, they resolved an issue causing the activation sounds to be more audible to other players than intended. And that's something I ran into a few times with my testing as well. It was very inconsistent, but sometimes you would hear that really loud beeping sound with Dead Silence, and then other times you wouldn't hear it at all. Now finally, with today's video, when it comes to the important changes that were made with the Season 2 update, let's talk a little bit about ranked play. First off, for Search and Destroy, they removed Skid Row from rotation and added Rio in rotation. For Hardpoint, they removed Terminal from rotation, but they added Rio and they brought back Subbase with a fix to the Subbase Hardpoint location. And then on top of this, they brought in the weapon restrictions that they mentioned a couple weeks back, so you can no longer use several of the guns that you could previously use in ranked play, as well as the JAK BFB muzzle that is now restricted. And they've also restricted the new BP-50 assault rifle, Ram 9 SMG, and the new Ninja vest. And with that, that's finally going to wrap it up for today's video on just a bunch of the really important miscellaneous changes that were made with the Season 2 update in Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer. As for my thoughts on this, keeping in mind this is just on paper, I haven't had any time to actually dive in and play the update since I've just been testing the update. On paper, this is sounding really good, especially with the first two things I mentioned in this video. I'm really glad to see that when you first aim down sight, your point of aim is actually going to be centered on your screen. Same thing with that hipfire adjustment. It's great to see that. And also, I'm very excited to check out the faster health regeneration that we've got by default. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts. And again, just a reminder, I will have all the weapon balancing changes in great detail in tomorrow's video. And this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about Season 2 so far? Are you generally liking these changes that they've made, or are there any changes you're not liking? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.